You're sitting on the couch after another ordinary evening. Dinner, small talk, the familiar rhythm of a Thursday that feels identical to last Thursday and the one before that. She's scrolling through her phone across the room, and you're doing the same. And somewhere in the comfortable silence, you've stopped noticing that you haven't really looked at each other in days, maybe weeks, maybe longer than you're willing to admit. There's no crisis, no fight, no dramatic moment you can point to and say, that's when it changed. There's just the slow accumulation of distance disguised as domestic peace, the gradual replacement of intimacy with logistics, the imperceptible shift from being lovers who built a life together to being roommates who manage one. This is how most marriages don't end. Not with explosion, but with erosion. Not through betrayal, but through benign neglect. Not because anyone stopped caring, but because both people stopped paying attention to what caring actually requires beyond the performance of responsibility. You're being a good husband by the metrics you were given. You provide, you're faithful, you help with the kids, you don't yell or disappear or create obvious problems. But somewhere beneath the surface of functional partnership, something vital is dying from lack of oxygen, from the slow suffocation that comes when presence is replaced by proximity, when being there is confused with being engaged, when you mistake not actively harming for actively loving. The warning signs are never dramatic because they're designed to be ignored, to blend into the background noise of busy lives and accumulated fatigue. She stops initiating conversation about anything that matters. Sex becomes scheduled or obligatory, or quietly abandoned. She no longer asks your opinion on decisions she would have consulted you on years ago. She's pleasant but distant, cooperative but disconnected, physically present but emotionally elsewhere. You tell yourself it's normal, that this is what long-term marriage looks like, that passion fades, and what remains is comfortable companionship. And you're half right. Passion does transform, intensity does shift, but what you're experiencing isn't transformation. It's abandonment disguised as maturity, resignation packaged as realism. What most men don't understand until it's too late is that women don't leave because of single catastrophic failures. They leave because of thousands of small, unresponded to bids for connection, because of years of feeling unseen while being looked at, because the emotional labor of sustaining intimacy alone becomes unbearable, and at some point they simply stop trying. She didn't wake up one morning and decide she's done. She spent months, maybe years, trying to tell you in 100 subtle ways that she's lonely in your presence, that the life you're proud of maintaining feels hollow to her, that she needs something you stopped providing so long ago you can't even remember when it disappeared. The cruelty of this pattern is that by the time she tells you directly, her decision is often already made. Not because she's cruel, but because she's exhausted from years of indirect communication you didn't register, from attempts at connection you didn't recognize as attempts. When she finally says, "I'm not happy," or "I need space," or "I don't know if I can do this anymore," you experience it as sudden, as coming from nowhere. But for her, it's the end of a long process of watching you choose comfort over growth, routine over risk, the safety of emotional distance over the vulnerability of genuine intimacy. Jung wrote about the dangers of psychic inflation, the way we convince ourselves we've arrived somewhere and stop doing the work that got us there, the assumption that love, once secured, maintains itself without continued investment. Marriage doesn't preserve connection. It only provides a container within which connection must be continuously recreated or it atrophies. The vows you took weren't a finish line but a starting point, an agreement to keep choosing each other when choosing requires effort, when staying engaged demands more than showing up physically, when loving means doing the uncomfortable work of remaining curious about someone you think you already know completely. Most husbands operate from an unspoken contract that goes something like this: I will provide stability, security, consistency. In exchange, you will remain, will appreciate what I've built, will understand that my presence is proof of commitment even when that presence is half distracted, emotionally disengaged, more focused on screens or work or hobbies than on the person I claim to love above all others. And for a while, maybe years, she accepts this contract because she's also tired, also overwhelmed, also willing to settle for functional over fulfilling. But humans aren't built for permanent settlement. We're built for growth, for challenge, for the kind of aliveness that comes from being truly seen and seeing in return, and eventually the gap between the life she's living and the life she senses is possible becomes too wide to ignore. The affair, if it comes, is almost never about the other person. It's about feeling alive again, about being witnessed with fresh eyes, about the intoxicating experience of mattering to someone who's actually paying attention. The other man isn't better or more attractive or more successful. He's simply present in a way you stopped being, curious in a way you stopped practicing, engaged in a way you forgot was necessary. She didn't betray you for excitement or novelty. She left because the version of herself that exists with you had become so small, so diminished, so thoroughly ignored that she no longer recognized herself in your presence. But the affair is just the obvious symptom. The real crisis is the years of emotional absence that preceded it, the daily choices to prioritize ease over effort, the gradual replacement of genuine inquiry with assumption, the slow death of the question, "Who are you becoming?" replaced with the certainty of, "I already know who you are." You stopped dating her when you married her, stopped courting her when you secured her, stopped pursuing her when you assumed her presence was guaranteed. And she tried, God, she tried, to tell you through mood shifts and withdrawn affection and increasingly direct statements that got dismissed as nagging or neediness or her problem to solve. From distinguished between mature and immature love by asking whether the relationship calls forth the best in both people or allows them to atrophy into comfortable mediocrity. Marriage becomes a trap, not when it limits freedom, but when it becomes an excuse to stop growing, an agreement that you've both earned the right to coast, to settle into patterns established years ago without examining whether those patterns still serve the people you're becoming. The wife who's checked out didn't fall out of love. She gave up on the possibility that you'd ever re-engage with the kind of depth and presence that made her fall in love originally. What saves a marriage at this stage, if it can be saved, isn't grand gestures or dramatic promises, or even therapy, though all those might help. What saves it is the daily decision to treat her like someone you're trying to win rather than someone you've won, to approach her with curiosity rather than assumption, to prioritize emotional presence over physical proximity, to do the uncomfortable work of asking what she needs and actually listening to the answer, even when it indicts your comfortable patterns. It's recognizing that she's not the same person you married 10 years ago, and neither are you, and that the relationship must evolve or it fossilizes, must deepen or it dies, must be chosen daily or it becomes a prison of habit and obligation. The men who lose their marriages through benign neglect aren't villains. They're good men operating from outdated scripts, believing that love maintains itself, that effort becomes unnecessary once commitment is secured, that being a good provider and decent person is sufficient. But love isn't transactional, it's transformational, requiring continuous mutual investment, continuous vulnerability, continuous willingness to be uncomfortable in service of staying connected. The wife who leaves isn't looking for perfection, she's looking for presence, for proof that she still matters beyond her function in your life, that you still see her as more than the person who manages the household and splits the bills and tolerates your gradually increasing disengagement. Look at her, actually look at her, and ask yourself when you last noticed something new, when you last asked a question you didn't already know the answer to, when you last took a risk in conversation instead of defaulting to the safe topics that require nothing of either of you. Notice how she responds when you walk into the room, whether her face changes or whether your presence has become background noise, indistinguishable from the furniture. Pay attention to whether she still shares her inner world with you, or whether she's learned that you're not really listening anyway, that your questions are formalities, that your attention is partial at best. The hardest truth isn't that you failed her through some dramatic betrayal. It's that you failed her through ordinary neglect, through the accumulation of small abdications, through the daily choice to coast rather than engage, to assume rather than discover, to settle for maintenance when she needed renewal. You thought the work was over when you got married. The work had just begun, and you stopped doing it, and now you're confused why the structure you built is collapsing when you've been maintaining the exterior while letting the foundation crumble. She's not gone yet. Or maybe she is. Maybe you're reading this after she's already left, after the words you didn't want to hear became the reality you can't escape. Either way, the lesson is the same. Love doesn't preserve itself. Marriage doesn't protect connection. Commitment doesn't replace effort. What got you here won't keep you here. And the woman you think you know is changing every day, becoming someone new. And if you're not paying attention to who she's becoming, someone else will be. Or worse, she'll become someone who doesn't need you at all, because you've trained her through years of half-presence, that needing you is lonelier than being alone. It's not too late until it is. And you won't know which side of that line you're on until you try, not with promises or flowers or the surface-level gestures that don't cost you anything real, but with the kind of attention that requires you to be uncomfortable, to ask questions that might have answers you don't want to hear, to engage with who she actually is rather than who you've decided she should be, to treat the relationship like something that needs tending rather than something that tends itself. The marriage you save won't be the marriage you had. It will be something new, built on the recognition that both of you are different people than you were, that the old patterns don't serve who you're becoming, that comfort is the enemy of connection, and routine is where intimacy goes to die. You don't get to keep her by maintaining what you built yesterday. You only get to keep her by building something new today, tomorrow, and every day after that, for as long as you both choose to stay.